Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to our final episode of our Inspired Live special, coming to you live from Work in Publishing Week 2024. And I'm delighted to be hosting our final session today. Today, our session is all about trade publishing. And I'm joined by two very distinguished guests who I'll introduce in a moment. Before then, just to go over, if you don't know about Work in Publishing Week, it is a week that's dedicated to promoting careers in publishing to show that it is a definite viable option and career route for anybody considering a career in the creative industries. And all this week we've had sessions on LinkedIn and YouTube, sort of exploring all the different sides of publishing that there are to kind of look at. So educational textbooks, ed tech, academic, scientific publishing. And yesterday we had a terrific session all about professional and B2B publishing. So just before I am going to introduce my wonderful panel, you're going to hear so many good things coming from them as well. But I just want to take one moment to say 20 seconds of courage. That's all you need. And then you can ask your burning questions. So be brave, be brave. And ask us questions. We want to hear from you. We want to know, we want to be able to answer the questions that you have. We have got lots of things to discuss, but yeah, we want to make this session tailored to you as much as possible. Now that's enough from me for now. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our incredible panel here. As you can see, we've got Sharon Marshall, who's head of recruitment at Bloomsbury Publishing. Sharon, welcome this afternoon. Sharon's a seasonal recruitment professional. She's worked in several different sectors, but she's now been at Bloomsbury for over 3.5 years, which is whizzed past, but she's responsible for all things recruitment for the UK business. Recruitment is her first love. She's passionate about harnessing their internal talent as well. But she is the person to speak to about getting that foot in the door. So Sharon, welcome to our session today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Suzy. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. And then we've also got Matt, who's a publishing consultant and a creative industries coach. And he works at the agency of True Places. And Matt's going to tell us all about this. But actually, we've known Matt for a little while. He began his career as a children's book editor at Working Partners before moving into the advertising world. He then rejoined publishing at Faber and Faber as the marketing director, using all of his experience that he'd learned outside of publishing. But yes, and then after Faber, Matt consulted for publishers and the creative agencies before taking on his last role in publishing as the UK managing director for Chelsea Green, where he was for six years. And we'll hear from Matt today about what he's been up to since leaving Chelsea Green, and hear about his company, the Agency of True Places. So thank you so much, guys, and Matt, for being here today. Let's get on with the show and hear from you guys. So tell us a little bit about how did you get into trade publishing? Sharon, I'll come to you first, because you've obviously worked in different sectors and then moved to Bloomsbury.
Thank you, Suzy. So I got into trade publishing by accident, to be fair. I had decided that I wanted a very definite shift in my career outside of the sectors that I had been working in. I felt I wanted to be in an environment that was more conducive to nurturing talent, creativity, and I came across the position at Bloomsbury. I thought it sounded absolutely amazing. It sounded exactly like the environment I wanted to work in. Very lucky to get the role. And it's been everything that I had hoped and wished for. And it's given me a huge step in terms of my own career development. So
amazing.
really,
Oh, fabulous. And Matt, I love your journey, because obviously you started in trade publishing, in editorial, which is like the probably most oversubscribed for roles. How did you do it? And then you came back and tell us.
Thanks so much for having me, Suzy. Hello, everyone who's watching. So I started at a children's fiction packager called Working Partners. And for anyone who doesn't know, Working Partners behind such mega hits as Rainbow Fairies, Rainbow Magic Fairies series, and Beast Quest, and the model there is, it's a sort of interesting reflecting on my own career and looking at that as a start. It's more of a kind of hybridized IP creative agency model. So they would go to publisher, ask what is missing on the list, and the publisher may say, actually, we're really looking for an adventure series for 7 to 9 year olds. So we would go away and come up with the concept and work with 3 or 4 writers to develop up a book arc that could then be dropped to, say, 6 or 7 books per season into a publishing program for a publisher. Cool. So it's a really, really successful and interesting model. It goes in and out of fashion and popularity, as publishing does, but it's an amazingly interesting place to learn a wide variety of skills. So concept development, storyline development, editing. For me, I was quite young and I found editing too slow, and that's why I left at the time. That was why, and literally where Working Partners were based in Hammersmith, next door was a creative agency, and I got friendly with the guys next door. So I finished my job at Working Partners, and then the next Monday I started my job as a copywriter in next door. So I've always been good at, it's important to leave these things on good stead, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And
how important networking is.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So that was how I got into trade publishing, and that actually was from a recommendation of a friend of mine. I was lucky enough to study at New York University for a couple of years, and he worked for Scholastic, and so he just said, look, I know these guys in London, they're really smart, and sort of set me up with a chat, and I started interning there and then moved into a permanent role.
Amazing. I mean, that's a brilliant story, and quite inspiring to you never know who knows who, and if you're even at university networking and hearing about what other people's networks are coming along, if you're watching this as at university, or like you could now reach out to us, for example. It's all about learning what you can when you can. Obviously we've all been in our careers for a little bit. I mean, I started my career in packaging. Also, I was at the Corto Group to start with. So I'm very familiar with the model, and it is a really smart way to publish. But you're right, it's kind of it does go in and out of fashion somewhat. But Corto are incredible company still today. But the world of trade publishing has changed massively. What have you seen change? I mean, and Sharon, I'm very conscious that you've only been in trade publishing, and you're trade and academic, and I sort of straddle both sides. But what's changed, do you think, about trade publishing, and what's exciting about it now?
In terms of the changes in trade publishing, to be fair, with such a junior level experience within trade, this is my first role in publishing, let alone in trade. So I can't give as much insight as to the changes that may have happened over the last 10 to 15 years even, but I can tell you from our perspective in terms of what's exciting now within trade at Bloomsbury, is that we are continuing to just grow leaps and bounds. We're continuing to break those glass ceilings in terms of how well we're doing. In terms of numbers, our numbers are consistently year on year up across all levels, in terms of revenue, in terms of profit, and sales.
Nice.
So we're really, really strong in the marketplace, being one of the few, should I say, major UK publishers that straddle both trade and academic. So we not only are doing something very different to others in the marketplace, but we are succeeding. So it's hugely exciting for us. I think many of you will know one of our biggest brands, which is Harry Potter. We're 27 years on and we're still doing great things in that space.
Yeah.
But, you know, something new that was just announced today is that we've just entered a distribution agreement with Spotify. So we are now
heard it here first.
Heard here first. We are now broadening, diversifying our reach and reaching out to many more listeners and encouraging them to enjoy the value of our books.
That's incredible. Exciting. Congratulations, Bloomsbury. It's really exciting. You guys have grown enormously, you know, lots of acquisitions in the last few years as well. And you're able to kind of diversify what you're bringing to the market as well, I'm sure, in terms of,
The biggest acquisition that we've made so far this year was for Rowman and Littlefield. That directly impacts our academic marketplace as opposed to trade, but it's a huge acquisition for us globally. So, you know, we're really doing exciting things and definitely should be on the top of your list if you're looking for a future employer.
Indeed.
Tiny little there.
I didn't notice it. Matt, what do you think? So you've been in, then you're out, then you're in, and it's like, then there's lots going on now as well.
Well, I really like, and it's fascinating to hear about Bloomsbury's growth as well. It's always been interesting to see how they anchored on the success of Potter. The kind of academic piece came in, and obviously the academic commerce model is very different, and a lot of the time is more rock solid than trade. Trade can be boom and bust. So actually it was always been a smart approach to have that hybridized model in what is originally a trade house, from my external perspective anyway. I think I was looking at it from both kind of roles when I was thinking about what has changed, but also the fact that, you know, there's a Pearl Jam lyric where they say everything has changed, absolutely nothing's changed, and that feels so true of publishing at all times. And I think where we are seeing important conversations happening that should have happened a long time ago, those feel emergent rather than progressive, perhaps. I think, however, the diversity of roles within publishers is changing. You know, I saw something on the bookseller last week, which was a sort of head of content role at Thames and Hudson. And that's really interesting that it's a content. Now, traditionally, 10 years ago, that's a marketing role. And that content piece is a tiny piece of the wheel. And I think it's interesting to see how focuses are changing. So I was just thinking about the fact that, you know, tech, as we said, is huge, emergent, ongoing. AI is actually kind of separate to tech. You know, we're talking about infrastructure. You know, metadata management has long been an important place for publishing in the world of discoverability. That is continuing to be refined and become more sophisticated. As content, from my background, marketing, particularly content and social media marketing, is now ostensibly sits there in its own right as very senior and important roles outside of a broader marketing plan, which might have a more traditional angle to it, say, if you know, the kind of, you know, outdoor media or whatever that looks like. And you know, podcasting, you know, actual generating original content and IP ownership around podcasts, not just partnering with podcasts. That's something that publishers are still finding that they're sort of feeling their way through. You know, we have high watermark stuff like Penguin did, but Penguin had Richard E. Grant to host it, so that was the hook. You know, scouting's becoming more sophisticated. I think there are really interesting opportunities in retail and e-commerce these days. I think there are still opportunities to be innovative within the space, but I think need to find the right publisher that has that strong sense of wanting to innovate and be interested in that, because some do, some don't, in my experience. And an area that is still, ironically, still trying to find its way, but it is essentially kind of a different marketplace, is audiobooks, which, you know, it is so entirely its own thing. It just happens to be a version of something that we are used to doing in paper. And I think that there are questions around that. And particularly, as Sharon just said, the fact that we finally got another decent sized player in the market who is interested in this format is going to hopefully generate more innovation and more competition and the things we need to keep growing, because that is a very expensive exercise, audiobooks. Yes,
it is. And it also draws us closer to the other sides of the creative industries, right? So it's you're seeing like Sony Music, like they've got a podcast side of their business now and things like that. And it's like, it sort of feels a bit like, you know, the digital revolution. I think when we first started talking about, which is like back in 2010, 11, that kind of time. This is like the new sort of exciting thing. AI, obviously, we have to mention as well. It's a Marmite situation for the industry, as digital was, I think. And you know, it's here, it's growing, it's becoming more intelligent. But I think that's the thing, like that strong word content and products used to be a bit of a dirty word in publishing as well, but I think we have evolved a lot since those times. Audiobooks is huge and going to get bigger, I think, and podcasts, you're right. I always think about trade publishing as well, and like how much trade publishing influences what we see at the cinema and what we kind of see like here on the radio and things like that. And I think like the growth in audio will influence more books coming out there as well, and on the non-fiction side especially, I think there's a lot of growth to be seen there. And from the marketing point of view, the YA sector, the young adult sector, is just huge, and that kind of on the social media side of the sort of fandom, if you like, around the authors is just really exciting, and something a bit new. So what do you find most rewarding in your roles? Matt, I'll come to you first, because I did say I'd mix it up. So
yeah, sounds good. Well,
here it goes.
my current role of consulting and coaching is a totally different set. You know, it is more self-driven than being in-house. But I'll touch back slightly on a few months back when I was MD at Chelsea Green, who is a sustainable and green living publisher by trade and now owned by the Rizzoli Group. Discovery is always interesting, and you know, when new projects come through the door, a lot of projects at Chelsea Green were not necessarily agented, so there was a lot more willingness for the business for anyone who had a good idea or a good contact or someone they knew or an interesting chef or an interesting grower, they could bring that and help shape that moving forward. And you know, as a marketer, that's the only thing I can bring. That's my truth to that MD role. So as I look at that, all the other skills I acquired, the sales, production, all that, actually I would look at things and immediately begin to think about connecting it to that reader. What is that going to look like? What's it going to look like down the line? How does it going to sit on our list? And that part I find to be a very thrilling part of the role. And I think the hardest part is having to then reserve that energy for the year down the line when the book publishes, because you have that moment at the start where the acquisition process is super exciting. You then have the lull of the writing of the book, and then you kind of forget about it for a bit while it's in production, and then it pops up again when you're having to drive it home. And I think that process, if you don't love that, then publishing's probably not for you, I would say, because you can't fast track it. It is what it is. It is the core of what we do, and I think that's the bit you kind of learn to love. I've learned to love it. I didn't love it all at the start. You know, as a marketer, I'm really only seeing that kind of end product and the razzle dazzle. But when I was actually involved on the paper print binding spec and costs and the understanding of all that stuff, you know, it became more rewarding somehow, because I actually saw the guts of how it affected the business or impacted the business.
Yeah. Fabulous. I think that's one of the observations as well, a lot from people outside of the industry, like, why does it take so long to publish a book? So that's quite an interesting insight there. Sharon, over to you, same question. What do you find most rewarding in your role?
So being a people person, and recruitment being my first love, you know, the role that I'm currently sitting in as head of recruitment is, you know, my sweet spot. But what makes it so enjoyable is the fact that I am able to interact with creatives, and I feed off of their energy. So it's that energy, that excitement, that enthusiasm and love, sheer love for what they do, that is really tangible. And that makes my job all the more enjoyable. And seeing bright young talent coming in with all of that enthusiasm, it helps me to visualize exactly where they would fit. And, you know, I could start to see their career paths. And the best thing about what I do is seeing the talent that we hire in progress through the company.
Nice.
You know, I see each one as my little baby. And I like to see them
There's
grow.
a lot of them now.
I have a few. I like to see them grow. I like to see them being nurtured and grow within the industry and reaching their full potential. And then having those really interesting conversations with them as they move up the career ladder, where I start to learn even more from them. So yeah, I love what I do. I love the people that I work with. I love the candidates and applicants that I come across. It makes every day's different, every day's exciting. So yeah, I can't enthuse enough about how much I love what I do.
Yeah, that is so nice. And I think it's really reflective of the culture that you've have at Bloomsbury. Certainly
we are blessed with the culture at Bloomsbury. We're very, you know, we say we're a big, you know, a big small company, but really we are growing and growing and growing. But we've retained that small company family environment. It's really collegiate, and just the environment that you work in is just really conducive of being at your creative best.
Yeah. Did you find that, Matt, like nice cultures along your journey?
Absolutely. I think coming, what I would say about and we were chatting, you know, to slightly break the fourth wall. We were chatting a little bit before about, you know, there is value sometimes in depending on the sector, moving in and out of that sector to gain experience and come back with a fresh perspective. And I don't say that just from my point of view, but as a potential employer and as a previous employer, that's something that I am interested in, and I think is a valuable thing to bring is perspective, particularly as you're saying, Sharon, your 3 years as opposed to 30 is a really good thing for perspective and drive, and I think culture is what you make it a lot of the time. And, you know, growing Chelsea Green from 2 of us up in the UK, it was about what we could bring, and how it differed from the US business was really interesting. And much as, you know, that piece was building a list and being responsible for growing a new list, but also managing and looking after the US piece in the UK, you need to have a certain type of person. And in that case, in that business, I wanted slightly more senior people in role, and that was a deliberate decision because we weren't big enough to have lots of mentoring or programs in-house where we could do that. So we needed to just get on with the job in a different way. So I needed to have confidence that those peers of mine was responsible to a level. They could come to me, but I would also know they'd be responsible.
But I think that's also that's showcasing like responsible recruitment. And I think in that way, then you will build a really strong culture, like a results-driven organization that gets there's kind of less noise around, like just come and do the job and we'll collaborate and be creative together. So I think that's really, actually sometimes we need to be brave and make those decisions to get stuff done. We have had somebody being brave also. I've no idea who it is because it's just come up as a linked user, but I'm sure on the live show people can see who it is, so apologies. But how can prospective talent showcase that enthusiasm on their applications to Bloomsbury? So I think this was coming back to what you were saying, Sharon, about the type of people coming in and how you love working with them. How can somebody show that on an application maybe? What do you love to see?
So personally, from all of the applications that I've had to go through thus far in my 3.5 years, I enjoy reading those where I can really feel the person's personality. So it's not just a tick box exercise in terms of just addressing each one of the maybe the requirements of the role, but they're really talking with fluidity about what they're passionate about, and that really does come across. So just sharing your enthusiasm, sharing your interests, sharing your passions, that will come across in your application. And then once you've got, you know, your foot in the door in terms of an interview, you can then expand on that and your passion will come through. I can't say enough, but just being you and showing your passion is going to get you far further than trying to, you know, technically address a job description. That's not what we're looking for. It is about being slightly different, slightly thinking outside of the box, coming with a new angle. So just being yourself, really, that is
authenticity.
Huge plus.
I couldn't agree more. That's one of the biggest things. Like if you're applying for a job, like apply for jobs that you are really excited about, because that will shine through in your application, in your interview, and it's a lot easier. And that's what people, they want to see, that authenticity, the you know, the kind of individual, rather than just trying to tick all the boxes. Yeah. Did you have anything to add on that one, Matt, or shall I?
Well, I think the word, I would go as far to say, I think, and I know we'll talk a little on AI as well, but I think in a world of a business that is entirely based around IP and copyright management, pretty much, AI, the understanding of it, the utilization of it, and the prohibition of it, depending on where it's needed or not, authenticity is probably going to be the most important word in our industry in the next 10 years.
Agree.
And I think that's part of the reason why I set up Agency of True Places, because, you know, there's a Melville quote: "It is not down on any map, true places never are," which is where I got the kind of idea from.
Oh, I love it.
And it really matters to me because I've spent a career working and amplifying brands, amplifying authors, you know, bending my skill set around things, people, and actually I'm very proud of that. But also there's a truthfulness that I feel like I want to bring now to my work that perhaps is difficult sometimes when you're in a different environment. And I think that it's something that, particularly the coaching, you know, I'm really keen. I think that authenticity is going to become so important. It's a bit like live music. We don't have a live music equivalent in publishing. You know, a few £100 for a best-selling author to show up at Hay and do a session is not where we need to be. And it's long been a discussion in publishing. And I think that actually the big question is, as we know, bookshops are holding, which is wonderful, but we don't know if that's going to be forever. Physical product is becoming more expensive. It's becoming harder to find, you know, supply chains, etc., etc. That's just not so interesting to the people on the go, perhaps. But actually, the ability
it's good for them to know about.
But
be aware of.
And the ability to know that actually there will be a space in the market in the future where there will be genre fiction, which is AI generated based on a particular author type or a particular sort of author trait. That may be fine for some readers. They may want to download 10 books at, you know, 50p each, have it on their Kindle, ready to go on holiday, and that may be fine. But also, publishing needs to assert itself of what it stands for. And that has to be the authenticity of the writers and the sort of truth of the work that we do, which is bringing books to market and having these amazing things that that affect people. And so, yeah, I think absolutely that also reflects entirely on being authentic in those interviews and yourself. I absolutely agree.
And just sort of on that, just feels like actually one of the big pull factors to publishing, which you just touched on there, is that you can change people's lives with a book, and reading can change people's lives. There's so much around that, which I truly love about the industry, which is why I'm still in it 20 years later. I'm going to talk a little bit about jobs in publishing, seeing as we're sort of talking about applications anyway. We've spoken a bit about editorial, a bit about marketing, but we should talk about the other types of jobs out there, because what we find as recruiters, I'm sure you guys have found in your careers, and Sharon, you'll find as well, an editorial assistant in fiction, children's books, non-fiction, we're talking thousands of applications, I would say, because I think it's an education piece where everybody knows about editorial, or they're like, if you talk about publishing, you talk about the editor, but I think we should shine a little spotlight, a big spotlight, on all the other routes in and the value that they can build on you. Because Matt, you realised as well, you started in editorial and found it too slow, and you transitioned to find, because when we go into our first job, we don't actually know what we're supposed to do. We might not even know now what we're supposed to be doing, but there's a big sort of pressure on one to know. So let's talk about some other sort of routes. Sharon, shall I come to you first?
Yeah, certainly. There are many unsung departments within publishing. So just this week, Bloomsbury have been celebrating Working in Publishing Week, and they've been shining a spotlight on senior staff across the company. And we had a spotlight on Sarah McLean, who is our international group head of sales director, and she had mentioned how she started out in sales, and has developed a really long and successful career within that sales environment, and it is a really good route into publishing. For Sarah, she really has enjoyed getting to read all of those books and talk about the books to customers and travel the world in that role. So that's another route into publishing that possibly people wanting to come in haven't thought about. Obviously, alongside sales, you have marketing and the operations departments. You have production, who pull it all together and get that book out. A really key department within the company. And then we've mentioned it along the way during this session, but digital resources, hugely growing department for Bloomsbury, and there are lots of roles within digital resources, product. I know Matt, you mentioned it and said it was a dirty word, but product is a growing area for us at Bloomsbury. So there are many routes into publishing that don't necessarily have to start in editorial.
Nice. Matt, I think I actually said product used to be a dirty word, so yeah. I didn't want you.
Sorry, Matt.
I got told off for the first few years of my career by in publishing by agents by talking about content, and they get very cross. It's not content.
It's not just me. Yeah.
Well, who's laughing now? Turns out it was content, and I was right. I think a great example of is obviously when I worked at Faber has one of the great cover design sort of heritages in the whole industry, and a great friend of mine, Donna Payne, was headed up the creative team there as creative director for a good few years, and probably about 3 or 4 years ago now, Donna became global head of creative for Apple Books. And
oh wow!
So if you're talking about change. So that what's interesting
Stunning.
about that to me is that it's not a natural path for a book designer to think about where they could end up. And by that same token, I have friends who are agency designers, so very broad designers, who end up in publishing design and love it, but also feel that they've sort of narrowed their focus a bit. And I think that, like we're saying, the great thing is that if you keep your eyes open when you're in-house, if you get a role, whether it's a production role, if you do your core role well, other things will come your way and they will help broaden your skill set. And I think probably Sharon agrees with that. It's the ability to, I had a colleague at Faber who was in the PR department, and at the time I was setting up Faber Members Program, and turns out that she had a journalistic background and did all these incredible things. So I invited her to come over and become a marketer, which wasn't hugely popular at the time with my peer in PR. But the point being, those were the skills I needed. And so I wasn't looking for a marketer. I was looking for someone with something else. So I think it's actually the ability to, even if, or say, if you're a candidate and you've got a set of skills and you look at the job and the job is interesting, if you think you can do that job and you believe it, if you get the opportunity to speak to Sharon or to speak to someone else, they will see that in you in that moment, or Suzy, and so don't be put off by thinking, oh, actually, I've got this set over here. They're looking for something over here. If you can put a case together and it's an honest, truthful case, then you stand as good a chance as anyone.
I totally agree. I mean, I started publishing as a PA to like the directors of Quarto, for example. And what the great thing about that is that I got a massive overview of every single role across the industry. So production, design, editorial, sales, marketing, foreign rights, by the way, shine a light on foreign rights. So I moved into sales and marketing, and then I moved into foreign rights, and I absolutely adore foreign rights, and it's such an important part of the business as well, from a commercial point of view, and so brilliant. If you've got languages, you like books, you like research, you're basically going over to different territories to see if you can put a book within someone's program of a publisher in Denmark or Holland or wherever you're going. And that's such a brilliant sales role, because I think that's the thing about sales, is that no one thinks, oh, I want to be in sales, but actually it's publishing sales is like one of the best sales jobs in the world, whether you're selling to Waterstones in the UK and all the amazing independent bookshops, or selling rights, or putting together co-editions where you're bringing all these publishers into one massive print run. It's really exciting. So yes, I just wanted to give a bit of a plug on that side of things too, because it's obviously my passion. Now, quick question for Matt from Johanna. Thank you, Johanna. What do you mean when you say editing is too slow?
Good question. I just saw that, Johanna. So thanks for picking up on it. I think it was my perception of it. I was looking for something at the time in my career. I was in my early to mid 20s. I was looking for something more immediate, and moving from an editing role where I would be working on a manuscript for a whole week, and then I would be sending it back to the author with markups and then coming back. It just didn't work for me. It didn't. I felt my personality type was like I could do the work. I just didn't. I began to feel, I could feel my mind wandering, and I felt like, okay, this is not the way I wanted to go. But for me, moving into more of a kind of content generation role, a kind of like an advertising copywriting role, it's immediate, it's iterative, and I could change it quickly. So for that period of time in my life, that reflected really well. And as I've got older, or more distinguished, depending on how you look at it, actually I've appreciated that process more, and the slowness and the process of it. I suppose the other way to look at it is it can't be rushed. There is a slowness, there is a whole progression around slow food, around slow businesses, around living in a different way, and actually editorial embodies that to a degree in the terms of the way you can work in that process. Not always, but to a degree.
I think it's about learning about yourself and what feels right. So it's definitely preference. I don't think we're saying that editorial is slow by any means, but so it's just like what your preference is. If you love the detail and that kind of gives you a buzz, then that's that's a brilliant place for you to be, that kind of thing. Valentina has asked, what would you suggest to someone with a varied experience in publishing, who's looking for a role in an area of the business new to them? I mean, if I would just say, if you've got a varied experience, then you'd decide what part of your skill set, or like where you feel most energized, might make impact in a different role. Would you agree?
I'd agree. I would say that it starts with you, and that your enthusiasm and your drive will direct you as you navigate your career. So having that broad experience firstly puts you in a really great space, because you have a really good toolkit of transferable skills. Where you take that skill set is really up to you. And I would go with really what drives you, what gets you out of bed in the morning, what are you really enthused about, and take that direction. Yeah, I think that's probably the best hint I could give you.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think I pick up on something Matt said earlier as well about, like, you know, if there's an area you want to move into and you've got a varied experience, like, use the opportunity in front of you to like learn all about that area, and to shift it, like with you chatting to the guy, the creative agency next door, like beautiful example right there. So if there's you've got varied experience, I want to move into production or whatever, just go and hang out with production, make them a tea, say, what do you do? That kind of thing. I think that's probably the way I'd approach it.
I think you find out a huge amount just by asking someone, what do you do? People like to talk about what they do. They like to talk about their roles. They like to talk about what they're passionate about. So just going along and asking somebody, what do you do? You'll learn a huge amount, and it helps you to make the next step in terms of, okay, do I want to learn more about this area? Do I want to start pitching in? Do I want to volunteer in this space? Do I need to move on and ask about something different? Yeah. Just ask the questions. People love to talk. I'm one of them.
No. Amber obviously loved my pitch on rights, because she's asked if we've got any advice on how to get into foreign rights. I'm delighted by your question, Amber.
Well, they do go to the best parties at all the book fairs, all the foreign rights lot, and they go to the best dinners, always. So, you know.
They do. So how do we get into rights? I think if you've got sales experience, you've got languages, it's just about applying really, and like looking at the list and making that authentic application. As we've sort of said in all for all roles in publishing, it's just making it really tailored and authentic and interesting. And how you might make an impact. Have you guys got anything else to add to that one? We're getting loads of questions through now, so I'm just conscious of trying to get some more.
Just a really short note that if you do apply for a position, sales, marketing, rights, be prepared to come and pitch your ideas. Because it's not about what the company are currently doing. They want to know what could they be doing. So be prepared to pitch your ideas, and don't be scared to think outside of the box and come with something completely way off base. They're always interested to hear your thoughts.
Great advice. Is it possible, Quarina asks, is it possible to get into publishing without a master's degree? Absolutely. Do you guys have a master's degree in publishing?
I personally don't know.
Neither do I.
Actually, I do.
Oh,
but that was it was unintentional. At the time, it was
accidentally got that one.
It was an excuse to go and try and live in New York for a couple of years.
I love that.
So actually, you know, it was an opportunity at the right time. It was in publishing, but it was a kind of business degree that had a publishing slant to it.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, it was something I thought was interesting to do. It wasn't like a burning vocation at the time by any means.
Amazing.
So you need a PhD or nothing to get into publishing. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. No. It's funny though, because I do think it is a really, for those that are on MA in publishing, it is a fabulous route in. But I think, you know, it's not, we're actually trying to get a more diverse pool of candidates into our industry. And I think, you know, absolutely not a barrier if you're not coming with an MA. In fact, this is the whole point of Work in Publishing Week, which is to try and get the word into a broader sense. So we've been in touch, like targeting, you know, schools, careers advisors, university advisors, just try and put this our industry on more people's radars. So yeah, absolutely.
Definitely think if you haven't got that degree and you haven't done that learning, that you are coming with a completely different perspective, and that's exactly what publishing needs right now. It needs a new perspective. So don't look at it as a negative. It's actually a positive.
I would say of all the people I've employed over the years, one maybe had an MA in publishing. That's it. It was never about that. That was never a qualifier for me as an employer. It was more the passion, interest, diversity of what they'd done, experience base.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really heartening to hear, I think, for a lot of people out there as well. I'm going to do one more. Oh no, we've run out of time. Or can we just do one more quick question? What would be the best way to approach a recruiter? Oh, no, we can talk afterwards. If you send me a LinkedIn invite, I'll tell you all about that. And I'll send you some advice. For anyone else that has recruitment, job application questions, Inspired Selection has a massive resource on their website. It's inspiredselection.com. We've got a library. And because basically our library is our blog, and there's a candidate section, and there's so much advice on how to get into publishing. We haven't even touched on AI. The time has just whizzed past. I'm so sorry. We need to do part 2 or something. You'll have to come back and see us soon. So sorry about that, guys. Is there anything else you kind of want to say before I kind of close the show off? You guys okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, listen, thank you so much, Sharon and Matt, for coming along and being absolutely brilliant on today's Inspired Live to conclude our special Inspired Lives Work in Publishing Week. Thank you to our wonderful audience. I knew that my audience would be the best one. You guys have asked brilliant questions. You've been brave. I hope that you've got a lot out of it as well. Spread the word about publishing. Keep in touch. Inspired is always here to help you. And good luck to all of you publishing hopefuls out there. Have a good rest of the week. There's loads more events going on. There's a careers clinic tonight with Suzanne Collier over at bookcareers.com, and lots of other bits and bobs happening out there. So thank you again, everyone. And all that's left to say is bye for now.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.